Chapter 1. The Crimson Bloom. The air in the city of Viridian always hummed with a subtle energy, a blend of ancient magic and burgeoning technology. Kalen, a young artificer with more curiosity than caution, felt it thrumming through the soles of his worn boots as he navigated the bustling marketplace. His fingers, perpetually stained with grease and solder flux, twitched with an idea for a new kinetic enhancer. But today, his usual focus on gears and springs was disrupted by an insistent whisper, a melody weaving through the din of hawkers and the clatter of carts. It led him, as if on an invisible tether, to a stall tucked away in a shadowed alcove, a place easily overlooked. There, amidst a chaotic array of arcane trinkets and forgotten relics, sat a single, extraordinary object, a flower. It was unlike any flora Kalen had ever encountered. Its petals were a deep, pulsating crimson, almost alive with an inner light. The whisper emanated directly from it, a soft, sibilant sound that tickled the edge of understanding. The vendor, a wizened old woman whose eyes seemed to hold more starlight than common sense, cackled when Kalen approached. "Ah, the crimson bloom," she croaked, her voice like rustling parchment. "It sings to those who can hear, and you, my lad, have ears for the forgotten." Kalen, captivated, reached out a tentative hand. As his fingertips brushed against a velvety petal, a jolt, not of pain but of profound connection, shot through him. Images flickered behind his eyes, ancient forests, star-dusted skies, and a labyrinth of impossible geometry. The whisper intensified, coalescing into a single resonant word: seek. He purchased the bloom for a handful of coppers, the vendor pressing a small, tarnished silver key into his palm as well. "This will open the first gate," she said, her gaze unnervingly sharp. "But beware, the path within is not for the faint of heart." Many enter, few return changed. Back in his cluttered workshop, the crimson bloom pulsed on his workbench, its crimson glow casting dancing shadows. The whispers were a constant companion now, no longer a melody, but a chorus of fragmented thoughts and forgotten languages. Kalen, a man of logic and mechanics, found himself drawn into a mystery that defied all his understanding. He knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified him, that his life of predictable invention was over. The labyrinth called, and he, armed with a peculiar flower and a cryptic key, would answer. Chapter 2. The Shattered Compass. The tarnished silver key felt strangely warm against Kalen's palm. He'd spent the morning poring over ancient texts, searching for any mention of a labyrinth or a crimson bloom. The city archives, usually a haven of dusty certainty, yielded only whispers of forgotten lore, tales of trials and trials of spirit that hinted at something more than mere physical challenges. The bloom, meanwhile, seemed to absorb the ambient light, its crimson hue deepening with each passing hour. The vendor's words echoed in his mind. This will open the first gate. But where was this gate? Viridian was a city of countless doors, from grand public entrances to discreet alleyway portals. He examined the key more closely. It was simple in design, with a single intricate notch at its tip, too delicate for any lock he recognized. As he turned the key over in his fingers, the crimson bloom vibrated, a low hum that resonated through the workshop. Kalen looked from the flower to the key, a sudden intuition striking him. He held the key near the bloom, and a faint iridescent shimmer spread from the flower's core, enveloping the metal. The key's surface began to ripple, not with heat, but with a subtle distortion of light. Then, as if pulled by an unseen force, the key floated from his grasp and drifted towards the largest and most weathered wall in his workshop, a section he'd always attributed to ancient construction. As it neared, the mortar between the stones began to glow, tracing the outline of a door where no door had been before. The key hovered for a moment, then slid into the newly formed lock. With a soft click, the stone ground inwards, revealing not a passage, but a swirling vortex of muted blues and grays. It was an entrance, undeniably, but one that promised no solid ground. Kalen hesitated. This was not a mechanical puzzle to be solved, but something far more primal. Yet the whispers from the crimson bloom grew more insistent. almost coaxing. He looked at the flower, its petals unfurling slightly, as if in anticipation. He thought of the unknown, of the possibility that lay beyond the predictable confines of his workshop. Taking a deep breath, he stepped towards the vortex, the crimson bloom clutched tightly in his hand. As he passed through the threshold, the stone door sealed shut behind him with a silent sigh. He found himself standing on a pathway that seemed to be woven from moonlight, surrounded by an ethereal mist. In his other hand the key clattered to the ground, shattering into 1,000 iridescent shards. The compass he'd always carried, a sturdy brass instrument that had guided him through countless expeditions, now spun wildly, its needle a blur. It was broken, useless. Kalen looked around, a growing unease settling in his chest. The labyrinth had claimed its first offering, and his familiar tools of navigation were already rendered obsolete. Chapter 3: The Echoing Chimes. The mist swirled around Kalen, thick and disorienting, carrying with it the faint, discordant scent of ozone and damp earth. The pathway beneath his feet felt solid, yet it shimmered like polished obsidian. He'd stepped through the void, and now found himself in a place where the rules of physics seemed to bend and warp. The crimson bloom in his hand remained a steady beacon, its internal light a comforting contrast to the encroaching gloom. He walked for what felt like hours, the only sound the soft tread of his boots and the persistent melodic whispers from the flower. Then a new sound began to emerge, faint at first, then growing in clarity, the tinkling of chimes. They were delicate, ethereal, and seemed to resonate from every direction simultaneously. The notes were not harmonious in the way of a familiar melody. Instead, they shifted and changed, sometimes clashing, sometimes harmonizing in unexpected ways. As Kalen moved forward, the chimes grew louder, more distinct. He realized they were not mere ambient sounds, but emanating from crystalline structures that grew from the obsidian path, like frozen tears. Each crystal pulsed with a soft internal light, and as Kalen passed, they would ring out with a single, clear note. Some notes were high and sharp, others low and resonant. The effect was mesmerizing, a symphony of fractured light and sound. He noticed that the path itself seemed to react to the chimes. Where the crystals rang out with a particularly bright, clear tone, the obsidian path would glow with a subtle warmth. Where the notes were dissonant or muted, the path felt colder, more brittle. The crimson bloom, however, seemed unaffected by the shifting energies, its pulse steady and reassuring. He paused, trying to decipher a pattern in the chiming. Were they random? Or were they guiding him, indicating safe passage? He extended a hand towards a cluster of crystals, and as his fingers mirrored, they burst into a cascade of vibrant sound. The path beneath his feet surged with a warm golden light. He withdrew his hand and the light faded, the chimes subsiding to their previous more subtle song. The chimes, he murmured, the word carrying oddly in the hushed air. They are a language of sorts. The whispers from the crimson bloom seemed to agree, offering fragmented insights he couldn't yet grasp. He felt a growing understanding, a sense that the labyrinth was not merely a place, but a living entity, communicating in its own unique way. He continued his journey, carefully stepping near crystals that rang with clear, bright tones, avoiding those that produced discordant sounds. It was a precarious dance, a test of his observation and intuition. He realized that his analytical mind, so adept at dissecting mechanical systems, was now being forced to adapt to a more organic, intuitive form of understanding. The labyrinth was not a machine to be understood, but a living, breathing enigma to be experienced. And the echoing chimes were the first words it had spoken directly to him. Chapter 4: The Shifting Sands of Doubt. The obsidian path continued to wind, the crystalline chimes now a constant, if unpredictable, companion. Kalen had learned to navigate them, his steps growing more confident with each passing cycle of sound and light. But the labyrinth was not content with mere auditory puzzles. A new phenomenon began to manifest, far more insidious and unsettling. He started to feel a subtle doubt creeping into his thoughts. It was not the doubt of uncertainty about his path, but a deeper, more personal doubt. Whispers, separate from the bloom's melodic murmur, began to surface in his mind, insidious and unwelcome. They spoke of his past failures, his unfulfilled ambitions, the moments of weakness he'd tried to forget. "You're not clever enough for this," one whisper hissed, sounding eerily like his old mentor's disappointed tone. "You always mess things up, Kalen. This is just another grand disaster waiting to happen." Another voice, softer, more seductive, insinuated, "Why are you even here? Go back. Your workshop is safe. This is madness. You'll never find what you're looking for." These weren't mere intrusive thoughts. They felt external, projected directly into his consciousness. He looked at the crimson bloom, its light unwavering. Its whispers were a soothing counterpoint, a gentle reassurance. He tried to focus on the flower's presence, its silent encouragement. Then the very environment around him began to shift. The obsidian path seemed to waver, as if viewed through heat haze. The crystalline chimes would falter, replaced by moments of jarring silence or unsettling static. The mist, which had been a passive shroud, now seemed to coalesce into fleeting, shadowy figures at the periphery of his vision. They were indistinct, amorphous, yet they carried an aura of judgment. He stumbled, his foot catching on what felt like loose gravel, though the path had been smooth moments before. He looked down and saw not obsidian, but shifting sands, fine and dry, stretching out before him. The path had disappeared, replaced by a vast, undulating desert under the strange, luminescent sky. The chimes were gone, replaced by the sibilant hiss of the wind and the growing chorus of his own internal doubts. Panic began to prickle at him. This was a new level of trial. The labyrinth wasn't just testing his ability to perceive and navigate, but his very resolve. It was unearthing his deepest insecurities and using them as weapons. He clutched the crimson bloom tighter, its warmth a tangible anchor. He could feel the flower's energy pushing back against the invasive whispers, creating a small pocket of clarity around him. He had to find a way to ground himself, to resist the psychic assault. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore the illusion of shifting sands and the phantom figures. He focused on the solid, steady pulse of the crimson bloom, on the fragmented yet hopeful whispers it offered. He knew this was a test of his mental fortitude, a trial by doubt. He had to find a way to anchor his belief, to trust in something beyond the insidious voices whispering in his mind, or he would surely be lost in this shifting, treacherous landscape. Chapter 5. The Weaver's Threads. The sands of doubt, once seemingly insurmountable, began to recede as Kalen focused his will. He recalled the vendor's words, "The path within is not for the faint of heart." He understood now that the labyrinth's trials were not external solely, but internal as well. The whispers, the shifting landscape, were reflections of his own vulnerabilities, magnified and weaponized. He held the crimson bloom aloft, its crimson light cutting through the swirling mist and the lingering shadows of doubt. He concentrated on the steady, resonant hum it emitted, a sound that seemed to vibrate in harmony with his own heartbeat. Slowly, painstakingly, the obsidian path reappeared beneath his feet, the sands dissolving back into the polished dark surface. The crystalline chimes returned, their melodic, if complex, song, a welcome sound after the suffocating silence. He pressed onward, his senses now heightened, more attuned to the labyrinth's subtle manipulations. He had faced the shifting sands of doubt and found a way to stand firm. But the labyrinth was a place of constant evolution, of ever-present challenge. As he rounded a bend in the path, he found himself facing a new obstacle. Before him, the obsidian walkway was interrupted by a vast expanse of darkness. It wasn't a void, but a tapestry woven from threads of pure shadow, impossibly dense and opaque. The threads seemed to writhe and twist, creating intricate, ever-changing patterns. From these threads emanated a palpable silence, a void of all sound that even the crimson bloom's whispers struggled to penetrate. Suspended above this shadowy expanse were delicate, shimmering threads of pure light, stretching from one side of the abyss to the other. They seemed fragile, almost ephemeral, yet they held a compelling luminescence. Kalen realized these were his only path forward. He looked at the crimson bloom, its petals unfurling slightly, as if sensing the nature of this new challenge. He reached out a tentative hand towards one of the light threads. It felt cool, surprisingly solid, and pulsed with a gentle energy. He tested its strength, and it held firm. But as he prepared to step onto it, a new set of whispers began, fainter than before, but laced with a chilling, almost mechanical cadence. Each thread is a choice, they seem to say. Each choice has a consequence. Some threads lead forward, others lead to nothingness. The weaver knows your desires, your fears. Choose wisely. Kalen understood. This was a trial of consequence, a test of his discernment. The weaver, whatever or whoever that represented, was offering him a multitude of paths, each woven from light, but with hidden destinies. He looked at the crimson bloom again. Its whispers were now more urgent, a subtle melody that seemed to guide his gaze, drawing his attention to specific threads, nudging him towards certain patterns. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding. He had to trust the guidance, however cryptic. He chose a thread that shimmered with a particularly vibrant hue, a subtle invitation he couldn't ignore. He stepped onto it, feeling the solid support beneath his boot. The shadowy expanse remained below, silent and watchful, but the light thread held, carrying him forward into the heart of the weaver's intricate design. Chapter 6. The Orrery of Lost Stars. The journey across the weaver's threads was a marvel of precarious balance and intuitive leaps. Each thread, seemingly identical at first glance, possessed a unique resonance, a subtle vibration that Kalen learned to feel through the soles of his boots and the palm of his hand when he reached out for support. The crimson bloom remained a constant guide, its whispers subtly shifting in pitch and rhythm, indicating the strength and direction of the threads. He moved from one to another, a silent, luminous dance across the abyss of shadow. Finally, he reached the other side, his feet landing on a surface that felt like polished brass. The oppressive silence of the shadow tapestry was replaced by a gentle, rhythmic whirring, a sound that spoke of intricate machinery. He looked around and his breath caught in his throat. He stood in the center of a vast celestial observatory, but unlike any he had ever imagined. Instead of a dome of glass revealing the night sky, the ceiling above was an infinite expanse of pure, inky blackness, dotted not with stars, but with swirling nebulae of impossible colors and patterns. And suspended in the void, rotating with stately grace, was an enormous orrery. This was no ordinary clockwork model of planets. This orrery depicted celestial bodies that defied known astronomy. Planets spun with rings of solidified music, moons pulsed with bioluminescent light, and constellations formed patterns that shifted and reformed like living entities. It was a cosmic dance of the unknown, a map of a universe beyond comprehension. The crimson bloom pulsed with a newfound intensity, its whispers now a chorus of awe and wonder. Kalen felt a profound sense of insignificance, yet also a thrilling sense of discovery. He had navigated the weaver's intricate design and arrived at a place that charted the very fabric of existence. He noticed that the brass floor beneath him was etched with intricate lines and symbols, forming a complex circular diagram. As the orrery above rotated, points of light on its celestial bodies would occasionally align with specific points on the diagram below. When this happened, a soft chime would echo through the observatory, and the crimson bloom would glow brighter, its whispers becoming more coherent, offering fragmented insights into the celestial ballet above. He realized this was another puzzle, a celestial cipher. The orrery was not just for display, it was a key, a mechanism that revealed secrets about the labyrinth itself. He spent hours observing the intricate movements, trying to decipher the relationships between the celestial bodies and the diagrams on the floor. His artificer's mind, so used to tangible mechanics, was now grappling with cosmic gears and stardust. He found himself drawn to a particular cluster of planets in the orrery, a formation that seemed to be in a constant state of flux. As they shifted and realigned, the crimson bloom pulsed with an urgent rhythm, its whispers now a clear, insistent melody. He watched, mesmerized, as the formation reached a specific configuration, aligning with a symbol on the floor that depicted a stylized labyrinth. At that precise moment, the orrery above flared with a brilliant light, and the crimson bloom in his hand responded with a burst of crimson energy. A section of the brass floor slid open, revealing a dark, circular staircase, descending into the unknown. The whirring of the orrery seemed to deepen, as if acknowledging his progress. The orrery of lost stars had revealed its secret, and a new path awaited. Chapter 7. The Stillness of the Oracle. The circular staircase descended into an absolute, profound silence. It was a stillness that pressed in on Kalen, a void of sensation that made the soft whirring of the orrery above seem like a distant thunder. He clutched the crimson bloom, its familiar pulse a small but vital anchor in this unnerving quiet. The stairs were made of the same polished brass as the observatory floor, smooth and cool beneath his boots. As he reached the bottom, the staircase simply ended, depositing him in a chamber of obsidian, vast and utterly featureless. There were no walls, no ceiling, no floor discernible, only an unending expanse of black, so deep it seemed to absorb all light. Yet he could perceive his own presence, his own form, as if he were the only point of reference in an infinite void. The crimson bloom's whispers were almost entirely silenced, reduced to a faint internal hum. Kalen felt a growing sense of unease, a primal fear of the unknown that gnawed at the edges of his resolve. He had faced illusions, tests of doubt, and intricate puzzles, but this was different. This was an absence, a negation of everything he understood. He stood for a long time, his senses straining, trying to find any clue, any hint of direction. The stillness was absolute, not merely the absence of sound, but the absence of motion, of vibration, of any discernible energy. It was as if the universe itself had paused. Then, a single point of light, impossibly small and distant, appeared in the darkness. It wasn't a star nor a nebula, but a pure, unwavering luminescence. As Kalen focused on it, the crimson bloom stirred. Its whispers, though still faint, began to coalesce, forming a single resonant word that seemed to echo not in the void, but directly in his mind. Observe. He walked towards the light, his steps uncertain. The light grew larger, brighter, resolving into a singular crystalline structure suspended in the void. It was not ornate like the chimes, nor mechanical like the orrery, but perfectly simple, a multifaceted geometric shape that pulsed with a soft, internal glow. As he drew closer, he realized that the structure was not solid, but fluid, its facets constantly shifting and reforming, revealing glimpses of impossible realities within. He saw fleeting images of worlds he'd never dreamed of creatures that defied imagination, of events that stretched across millennia. It was like looking into a fractured mirror of existence, a glimpse of the infinite. He recognized this place. The legends whispered of a central nexus, a point of ultimate stillness where the labyrinth's core resided. This, he suspected, was the oracle, the silent heart of the labyrinth, where all paths converged and all truths were held in suspension. The crimson bloom pulsed strongly now, its whispers a gentle symphony of understanding. It was not a puzzle to be solved, nor a mechanism to be manipulated. The oracle was a presence to be experienced, a stillness to be absorbed. He needed to shed his need for action, for mechanical solutions, and simply be. He stood before the crystalline oracle, the crimson bloom held before him, and allowed the profound silence and the infinite glimpses of reality to wash over him. Chapter 8. The Unraveling of Intent. The stillness of the oracle was not an emptiness, Kalen realized, but a fullness. It was a state of pure potential, where all possibilities existed simultaneously, unmanifested. He had learned to observe, not with his eyes but with his essence, absorbing the silent truths that the crystalline oracle offered. The crimson bloom pulsed in his hand, its light a warm reassurance against the profound quiet. He had expected pronouncements, revelations, perhaps even a direct answer to the labyrinth's purpose. Instead, he received only understanding, a subtle shift in his perception. He felt the labyrinth not as a prison or a trial, but as a journey of becoming, a process of internal architecture. The oracle showed him that the labyrinth was not designed to trap, but to transform. As he stood before the oracle, a new sensation began to dawn. The fragmented whispers from the crimson bloom started to weave together, forming a coherent narrative, a story of purpose. It spoke of a great imbalance, of a world where the spark of creation was fading, where the threads of destiny were fraying. The labyrinth it revealed was a mechanism of restoration, a grand experiment in reweaving the fabric of existence. Then, the structure of the oracle began to subtly shift. The infinite blackness around him began to resolve into faint shimmering lines, a nascent web of interconnected possibilities. It was as if the oracle, having imparted its silent wisdom, was now showing him the next stage of its work. The crimson bloom glowed with an unprecedented intensity, its light pulsing in time with the unfolding web. Kalen felt an echo of that energy within himself, a surge of understanding that went beyond intellect. He understood now that his own journey, his interactions with the chimes, the sands, the weaver, and the orrery, had been small threads in this grander tapestry. He had been an active participant, not just a passive observer. The whispers grew clearer, more direct. They were not just explaining the labyrinth's purpose, but revealing his role in it. He was not merely a seeker, but a craftsman, an artificer of reality. His skills, honed in the predictable world of mechanics, were precisely what was needed to mend the fraying threads of existence. The web of light expanded, intricate and breathtaking. It was a blueprint for a new reality, a vision of balance and harmony. Kaylin saw how the elements of the labyrinth, the challenges he had faced, were all designed to equip him, to refine his intent, to prepare him for this moment. The oracle did not speak with words, but with pure understanding. It was the unraveling of his intent, the revelation of his true purpose within the labyrinth's grand design. He felt a profound sense of acceptance, a shedding of self-doubt, replaced by a quiet determination. He looked at the crimson bloom, its vibrant crimson now a symbol of nascent creation, and knew that his journey was far from over. It was, in fact, just beginning. Chapter 9. The Loom of Fate. The unfolding web of light, revealed by the oracle, was more than a vision. It was an invitation. As Kalen absorbed the profound understanding imparted in the still chamber, the web began to solidify, becoming a tangible tapestry of luminous threads, stretching out from the heart of the oracle and permeating the void. The crimson bloom pulsed in his hand, its energy now flowing into the nascent structure, a vital spark of crimson amidst the pure white light. He understood. The labyrinth was a cosmic loom, and he, the artificer, was now tasked with weaving. The oracle had shown him the grand design, the harmonious pattern of a balanced existence. Now he had to enact it. He stepped onto the illuminated threads, and they held him, firm and supportive. The vast obsidian chamber dissolved, replaced by a swirling nebula of potential, the threads of light stretching out in every direction, forming an intricate, ever-shifting pattern. He could see where the existing threads were worn thin, frayed by neglect, or broken by dissonance. He could also see where new threads needed to be woven, creating connections and harmonies that had been lost. The crimson bloom acted as his tool, a conduit for the energy he needed to manipulate the luminous strands. When he touched a thread with the flower, it would glow brighter, becoming pliable, allowing him to guide it, to mend breaks, or to weave it into new configurations. The whispers from the bloom were now a constant stream of guidance, not mere suggestions, but clear instructions, a symphony of celestial mechanics. Here, a whisper would guide, pointing towards a particularly worn section of light. Mend it with balance. Kalen would touch the bloom to the fraying thread, and its crimson light would infuse the white, reinforcing it, weaving it back into the larger pattern. He moved with a newfound purpose, his artificer's instincts guiding his hands. He wasn't merely connecting points, he was creating harmony, restoring resonance. He mended tears in the threads of empathy, wove new connections between realms of thought, and reinforced the strands of creative inspiration. It was an intricate, delicate work, requiring immense focus and an understanding of the subtle energies at play. He encountered moments where the threads resisted, where dissonance seemed to push back against his efforts. These were the echoes of forgotten conflicts, of broken promises, of lost hope. In these moments, the crimson bloom's light would deepen, its whispers becoming more urgent, encouraging him to find the underlying harmony, the potential for unity, even within discord. He realized that his past trials had been crucial preparation. The doubt he had faced had taught him resilience. The The chimes had taught him to listen to subtle frequencies, the weaver's threads had taught him the importance of choice and consequence, and the orrery had shown him the interconnectedness of all things. He was no longer just Kalen, the artificer from Viridian. He was a weaver of destinies, a restorer of cosmic balance. The loom of fate stretched before him, and with the crimson bloom as his guide, he began to weave. Chapter 10: The Dawn of Resonance. The infinite expanse of the loom of fate shimmered around Kalen, a testament to his tireless work. The threads of light, once worn and frayed in places, now pulsed with a renewed vibrancy. Where darkness had threatened to consume, luminous connections had been forged, a tapestry of restored harmony. The crimson bloom in his hand was no longer just a tool, but an extension of his own being, its crimson glow intertwined with the brilliant white of the luminous threads. The profound silence of the oracle had given way to a gentle, resonant hum, a symphony of interconnected energies that permeated the vastness. It was the sound of balance reasserted, of creation renewed. Kalen felt the labyrinth, the grand cosmic loom, breathing around him, its pulse steady and strong. He had mended the final tear, reinforced the last frayed strand of despair, and woven a new connection between hope and understanding. The whispers from the crimson bloom, once fragmented and mysterious, had now coalesced into a single clear voice, a voice of profound satisfaction and quiet triumph. "It is done," the voice resonated, not in his ears, but directly in his mind, a gentle echo of the oracle's silent wisdom. The resonance is restored, the balance rewoven. As the final word settled, the loom of fate began to recede, the luminous threads folding inwards, coalescing into a single brilliant point of light. The vastness of the void dissolved, replaced by a familiar, yet somehow transformed, vista. He found himself standing not in his workshop, nor in the celestial observatory, but on a high wind-swept precipice overlooking the city of Viridian. The city below pulsed with a new energy, a subtle vibrance that hadn't been there before. The air, once merely humming, now sang with a quiet harmony. The crimson bloom in his hand began to fade, its vibrant color softening, its petals unfurling one last time before dissolving into a gentle shimmer of crimson dust that settled onto his outstretched palm. He looked at his hands, still faintly stained with solder flux, yet now imbued with a profound understanding of creation and restoration. His journey through the labyrinth had not been about finding a hidden treasure or uncovering a secret truth, but about discovering the artisan within himself, about learning to mend the world, not with gears and springs, but with intention and harmony. He was Kalen the artificer, the weaver of fate. The labyrinth had not ended, but transformed. He carried its essence within him, the knowledge of balance, the power of creation, the silent song of resonance. As the first rays of a new dawn broke over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of rose and gold, Kalen knew that his true work, the work of weaving a brighter reality, had just begun. The whispers of the labyrinth had faded, replaced by the quiet hum of a world reborn, a world in perfect, resonant harmony,